Welcome to Bad Dog Agility, a podcast helping you reach all of your dog agility goals. Whether it's competing under the bright lights of the televised finals at Westminster or successfully navigating a homemade course in your own backyard, we'll bring you training tips, interviews, and news about the great sport of dog agility. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
I'm ready.
The show starts with your hosts, Jennifer, Esteban, and Sarah.
I'm Esteban.
And I'm Sarah, and this is episode 373. Today's podcast is brought to you by St. Rocco's Treats.
You don't just have an ordinary dog. Your dog is an athlete, and extraordinary dogs deserve extraordinary treats. Here at St. Rocco's Treats, we hand-bake every treat with human-grade ingredients, so your furry athlete only gets the best. Your dog will fall in love with the delicious, attention-grabbing flavor, and you'll fall in love with the easy-to-break texture for zero mess during all your training sessions. Find out why St. Rocco's has already become the treat of choice for countless agility dog competitors. Visit us at strocco'streats.shop and use the code BD30 for 30% off your order. St. Rocco's Treats, the perfect high-value reward for your high-performance dog.
And you can find a link to St. Rocco's Treats on the show notes page. Today's podcast is also brought to you by Clip & Go Agility. Clip & Go Agility has been innovating high-quality, unique agility products for over 15 years. Their goal is to move the sport forward by providing the safest possible equipment for our canine partners. They offer not only jumps, tunnels, and contact obstacles, but also many problem-solving training aids. Clip & Go understands how fitness plays a large part in our dog's overall safety and are pleased to also offer a variety of fitness products to meet your dog's conditioning needs. They include soft jump bumps, cavaletti jumps, VersaFit planks, fitness blocks, and paw pods. Check them out at clipandgoagility.com/fitness. Use promo code BDA10 to get 10% off any fitness product. Clip & Go Agility, because safety matters. Today, we're going to be talking about burnout in dog agility. And this is something that I am sure at least some portion of our listeners have dealt with. I think it happens really in any activity that you put a lot of time and effort into. And so we wanted to talk about this today and kind of walk through what burnout is in agility, maybe why it happens, particularly in our sport, and what we can do about it.
First, I think we should probably start with a definition. And so I think a pretty good working definition is you, as a dog agility person or competitor, or being involved in the sport and however you're involved, whether you are a member of an organization, a judge, a competitor, an instructor, right? Or many of us do multiple, right? We have multiple roles. Yeah, exactly. But if you are feeling emotionally exhausted, right? Like you take a weekend off and you come back Monday and you still feel tired, even though you got 8 hours of sleep a couple nights in a row, you're just not enjoying the sport as much as you used to, right? You have a big reduction in kind of the joy you experience, the joy the sport brings. I think those are two of the hallmarks of burnout. That dog agility specific burnout. And I think this happens in a lot of sports. And I know that many of our listeners have experience in youth sports or were competitors in other sports before they did dog agility. And that was a little bit of the draw of dog agility, right? That you can still participate and kind of measure yourself against a standard and compete. And, get those ribbons and go to these events, and the structure of it all is very familiar to you. So for myself, for example, I did a lot of sports when I was a kid. But the big one I ended up doing the longest was swimming. I swam in high school and then I swam in college. And swimming is a high burnout sport. Let me tell you, right? I had many teammates that were just like amazing swimmers, and by the time they finished high school, they were done. They could have swam in college and they were like, I am done with this. They had sacrificed, they felt like they had sacrificed so much of their lives to it. But when you look deeper, it was two things, right? Emotionally, they were exhausted because physically they're at peak condition, right? At the absolute top of their game, recovery, nutrition, all those things. And they just were not enjoying it in the way that they used to, right? And some of them would burn out like during high school. Like they peak in like middle school and then they're like, I am done with this, right? And a lot of their best times would come in high school. And by the time they get to college, there's just so many other things that they would rather be doing.
Right.
Right. Because those things are interesting and fun and low pressure and bring them joy. Right. And kind of recharge their batteries rather than depleting them. So those are the two things that I really think of, just the emotional exhaustion and loss of joy.
Right.
Right. And I think they can happen to people in agility, obviously, but I think it can kind of happen periodically even.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. I feel like I have had periods of time where I have experienced burnout. And I think, we should probably do another podcast on this topic, but I think of it sometimes in terms of grief, like loss of a dog, right? Mm-hmm. And suddenly I become very burned out. Like the emotion is not there, right? Because you experience this loss. So emotionally you're exhausted from that loss, right? And then you have no joy from doing the sport with your other dog because you are in this loss, right? Mm-hmm. So this grief very much looks like burnout. In fact, based on my definition of being emotionally exhausted and loss of joy, grief leads directly to burnout, right? Or it's synonymous with burnout, right? And I remember, I having lost some of these dogs, and the longest period I went before I could pick up a toy and even tug with my dog for fun was, I think, about 6 months. Like I think I was out of competition for 6 months. I just could not do it, right? And I've also experienced burnout professionally, mm-hmm. right? As a physician, there are times, especially when you're coming up as a doctor, medical student and intern residency and all that, where yes, it's tough, it's physically exhausting, it's mentally demanding, all of those things, but it's also a little bit exhilarating, right? Like you
learning
get a lot out of it and just, and taking on this new role and really helping people, like all the different things you do, medicine for the intellectual challenge. And when you've been out there in the mud, mm-hmm. slugging it out, fighting in the system for your patients, for yourself, for your colleagues, again, emotional exhaustion, loss of joy. Right. Burnout.
Right. So I want to stop you right there because I think that you've brought up an interesting point, because I think that many, many people are familiar with burnout in the context of work. I think we hear that a lot, right? Work or school, right? You get burnt out. You're just working so hard and you're not enjoying it anymore. And it's maybe the same every day. And that's kind of one of those phrases that we hear with burnout. And I think that one of the things that is sneaky or maybe extra devastating about burnout in dog agility is that people don't expect to experience it there. Right? This is their
hobby.
Right.
Yes.
This is their hobby. This is the thing they do, quote, for fun. And now it is not fun. And I think that can catch a lot of people off guard and make them feel, like there is something wrong with them or their dog or their relationship with their dog or things like that. And I think that there can be other things happening in our sport that are contributing to there being this possibility for burnout. And I want to kind of talk about some of those things so that people are not so devastated when it happens and that they can see some possible paths out of feeling burnout in the sport.
Okay, well, before you do that, I also want to say that you used the word sneaky. So I think there's something sneaky here, and it's not that burnout isn't always loss of joy, like complete loss of joy. It is not always the way that sign goes in burnout, right? So you could be enjoying it just much less. Mm-hmm. Like you're still enjoying it. You're still having a good time, but not like you used to.
Right.
And so when you hit that stage, people are like, wait, I don't think I'm burned out because like I'm still enjoying this, or I still enjoy parts of this, but it wasn't like it used to be. And because there's a total loss of joy, I think people kind of miss that perhaps they are burnt out, right? And we're going to talk about some solutions.
Right.
Right. But right now, in trying to create this definition, this 2-part definition that we kind of come up with, it's to help you identify whether or not you are experiencing some burnout. Because whereas you're saying, oh, okay, it's very obvious when you're having burnout, I don't know that that's necessarily true in all cases. I think a lot of people are burnt out and they don't quite realize it, or they attribute it to something else.
Right.
Like, oh, I'm not getting enough sleep, or, oh, I'm not training correctly, or whatever, right? But it's actually burnout, right?
Right. And so I think that one of the things that I think is so interesting about our sport when we think about burnout is that, and this is why I think it's interesting to talk about it in the context of dog agility, is that we participate in a sport that has no season. Right? Like there's a basketball season, there's a football season, right? There's a baseball season, and everybody has an off season.
That's what you're getting at, right? So there's a built-in break.
Right.
Right after the end of the big event, the championship game, the Super Bowl, the World Series, whatever, there are going to be several months where all the players don't do that sport.
Right.
Right? And so a built-in off season is critical for not just physical recovery, but emotional and mental recovery. Right? To kind of remove that pressure to let you experience other things besides, training multiple times a day, in these other sports. And agility it can easily turn into that. Right.
Yeah. And I think even more so now than when you and I first joined the sport, because of so many different organizations, and even within the organizations, so many different opportunities.
They try to have events year round.
Right. So
really pack the calendar in.
Right. When we started agility, the big thing for AKC was AKC Nationals. Mm-hmm. Right. And then they added the Invitational. Right. And now they also have the ISC Championship. Right. And UKI had the Open, but now it has a West Coast Open, and it has their Invitational. Mm-hmm. And so, and UKI didn't even exist when you and I started. So the number of events that are available to you has gone up so much. And again, it makes it just so that people are competing at a high level year round without having any sort of like built-in break. And I think that is one of the reasons why people are going to feel burnout in the sport.
Yeah. I think it's important to kind of normalize that it happens, and it happens in dog agility. And this is part of me always saying that dog agility is in fact a sport. Right. Right. So it behaves like a sport, so to speak. And anytime you have a sport that has kind of year-round training, long-term training, right? We measure progress in what? In days or years?
Right.
Years, right? So you have to invest years into a particular dog, so the dog handler team, before you can even get out there and start to compete.
Right.
Right? So it's a huge investment in terms of time. Frequent travel, right? Emotional investment, right? Not just in the sport. I'm talking about in your canine partner, right? And I think in the same way that people have to deal with other people, i.e. teammates,
right?
You have a teammate, and oh, by the way, you're responsible for the health and well-being of that teammate as well.
You have to feed them and take them out to the bathroom. Basketball players don't have to do that.
for each other, exactly, right. So in preparing for this podcast, we did look a little bit into some research in human athletics. So studies that looked at swimmers and gymnasts, soccer players, youth soccer, right? And it shows that burnout is especially likely when your identity, your goals, and your social communities are really tied to your performance, right? And so I think, who does that sound like? I mean, it sounds like dog agility people, right? And so, when we look at signs, we can look at signs actually both in the handler and the dog. I think the dog, that's a little dicier because, the dogs can't talk, so we can't always tell.
And they feed off of the handlers.
Exactly. And I think that's a critical point that you just said right there, right? Because dogs are so empathic. I'll choose that word, right? And that if something is wrong with you, the handler, like you're burnt out, it is going to impact the dog's performance, most dogs' performance in some ways, right? Because not every dog is the kind of dog who can just run for other people at the drop of a hat or for a dog biscuit or a game of tug, right? They very much mirror the emotional states of their handlers. And so I think as a person, if you are dreading or avoiding going to practice, I think that's a big one. That's when I was so slow to recognize when I was burnt out. But one of them is you go from being pretty excited to take a 45-minute drive. And for some of you, I know that you are driving 2, 3, 4 hours, maybe a week to get to your agility classes, your in-person agility classes. You're excited about that and you got your books on tape ready to go, or you're listening to our podcast, etc. But suddenly that's not doing it for you, right? And you are dreading going, and then you're like, maybe I just don't go this week, right? So avoidance of doing the actual thing, right? And then I think feeling resentful. So you go and you do all the things, but you kind of resent it.
Or you're like, that wasn't worth the drive. That wasn't worth the time.
Yes. You may become a little bit more critical of yourself and your dog, right? I think that's very common. When you get there, you kind of go through the motions, right? This happens a lot with athletes. Like coaches can sense it. They're like, "What is wrong with you? Like, what is going on there?" And they're like, "I don't know. I'm not feeling it." And the wise coach, the observant coach, the experienced coach will be like, "You need a day off." Right. Or if the team is kind of struggling, everyone's a little burnt out. This happens a lot in swimming or like Christmas training. The brutal 2 weeks where you're off from school, but you're in the pool like twice a day, putting in massive yardage, miles and miles a day, can really suck the life out of you, right? And so the coach has to know when to back off, right? And bring a little fun to practices. And another, I think, pretty good one is you have I'm hesitant to say like chronic injuries, but like you feel very tired physically and you might have nagging injuries or re-injuries. I think that's more on the physical side of burnout. And that speaks to not allowing yourself time to recover. Right. The way we say it in sports is you don't know about all the little tiny micro tears and things like that you've kind of accumulated over the course of a season that maybe didn't have time to properly heal before, bam, you're in the next game. Right. Bam, you're in the next agility competition. And suddenly a small calf injury is now a nagging on and off 2-year thing for a dog agility handler. Right? Yep. That occasionally keeps them out. They're limping occasionally through some trials. But if you took 3 months off and then properly rehabbed it, it wouldn't be a problem at all. But you can't do that, right? Because you might miss out on something. Right?
Hey, it goes back to our FOMO podcast. It goes back to the FOMO.
That's right. So I think those are all, I think, signs. And so some of you are listening, you're like, oh, maybe that is me. And so, I think that's why we're doing this podcast. We want you to kind of think, am I burnt out? And now, let's talk a little bit about, I think a couple of other factors, actually. I was going to say, let's talk about solutions, but a couple of other things to keep in mind are that social media always plays a role in burnout. Not always, but I think can
only
play.
Since the 1990s or only since the early 2000s. Burnout happened before then too.
Yeah, because there's saturation.
Yes.
Right. So on your Facebook feed, especially if you were like me, and I actually reduced a lot of political posts that made it to my feed from what other people post. Right. And I'm not watching the news. I want to break from the news. So I turn that off in my feed. And then your feed is just purely dog stuff, right?
Right.
But it's 24/7, every day, every competition and constant runs on there. And it's just a reminder, of what you're doing. And it is a lot, right? It can be a lot. And sometimes you need a break, right? And social media doesn't let you have that break. Right. That's not how the algorithms work. Right. That's not what they're designed to do. They are designed to keep you engaged and involved in whatever it decides that you like based on your previous behavior on the internet. Right. And so in that sense, in that way, social media kind of feeds into burnout.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. It becomes part of that problem. I think perfectionists also struggle with burnout.
Yes.
I want to say more so than other people because and I say we because I feel like I'm a perfectionist. Do you think you're a perfectionist? I think you.
I mean, I can be.
Can be.
I am in
but I think
some
that I
aspects.
am.
Right. It depends on the aspect.
Wait, do you think I'm a perfectionist?
Oh, 100%, yes.
It was a trick question. You were supposed to say no.
You just said you were.
So, I think that can definitely be me because even though it's really good that I think about dog agility in terms of like, how do I fix these problems? And so I think of them as puzzles and I don't take it personally, right? Like it's personal failure. At the same time, sometimes maybe I didn't enjoy wins and things and big moments quite as much because I was already thinking about how do I fix this thing?
Right.
I'm on to the next thing. Right. And it is really a never ending cycle, right? Iteration. You're striving for perfection. You usually never quite get there. Occasionally you get a perfect run. And in chasing that, it can be a little burnt out. Like you get a little burnt out, right? So I think that happens. And just like all these other sports. So now I'm about to talk about things that are common to all sports and probably your work, your job, right?
Right.
If there are issues with travel, like if you're traveling, and I know a lot of people are traveling all over the United States, sometimes every week just to get to classes. And there's another group of handlers who are going to international competitions and the stress and flying a dog, right? That's a problem. Irregular sleep, time zone changes, that takes a physical toll on both you and your dog. Inconsistent nutrition, right? I think a lot of people have learned to like bring their own food. But if you are traveling around, like you don't always know what's available to you, right? I think a lot of times we take a better care of our canine partners than we do ourselves.
Oh, for sure.
In terms of nutrition and food and water, right? And, the aches and pains, injuries, and really not taking care of ourselves. We get our dog a Bosu ball and they're working with chiropractors and getting canine massage. And how many of us do that for ourselves?
Right.
I think more and more people are starting to do that and to really pay attention to that, right? But it has not always been built into the dog agility culture, right? We're kind of a dogs first community, right? So research shows us a couple of things. And again, we looked at a compilation of over 30 different studies, youth sports, collegiate athletes, Olympians. Predictors of burnout are pretty consistent regardless of sport. So high training volume without planned rest. Right. And you've already alluded to how you can basically create a year-round season, which we think is bad. So here in Texas, we kind of naturally do it in July.
The summer.
I think for several years because it's so hot and you couldn't be outdoors.
So,
of course, this is before everything moved indoors.
Yes, that's
which
true.
Again made things 24/7. Up in the north, the winter would be the natural slowdown. But now with all these great new indoor facilities, you can go year-round.
Right. Well, I want to pause just here 1 second and talk about one thing about taking a planned break. I think the planned part is important. And I think viewing it as a break is also very important because I don't think that it is very useful to burnout to grudgingly take some time off. That's why I think that's one of the reasons that I want to have this podcast, because if people are burnt out and they give themselves some time off, but they feel bad about it the whole time they're taking it off because maybe nobody else is, or they think nobody else is because their feed is full of other people doing agility, and things like that. If they aren't building that in, and if they're taking that time off but feeling guilty about it, that's not going to get you out of burnout. Because you haven't reduced that emotional weight, right? You're feeling guilty. You're feeling like you're not good enough, like you're not doing enough, right? You haven't fully let go and embraced your personal off season. And so I think that is also important part of taking a break is to really honor that break. So you said we take off in the summers, right? And that is true. It's too hot. We can't really train. We definitely can't train every day in our yard, and stuff like that. We've always taken off summers because we had to. But for years and years and years, we didn't say we were taking off summers. We just didn't train because every time we thought about training and we went outside, after 5 minutes, we were dying and the dogs were dying, right? And then we came back in, we got nothing done and we felt really bad about it. And then, maybe the next summer we're like, okay, well, we can't go train right now. It's too hot. Maybe if there's a cool break, we'll go back out there or whatever. We'd still feel bad about it.
I mean, yes, but at some point I made summers a break. Like,
no, that's where I'm going with it. What I'm going with it, where I'm going is it started out that way, but then at some point we recognize this happens every year. We can't really train in the summer and we feel bad about it. Let's make it official and let's not feel bad about it. And so we made it, we were just like, it gets above 90 degrees and we just stop training and we don't feel guilty about it at all. And that is when things started to feel better and you started to have like a true off season.
Gotcha. Okay. So that speaks to high training volume without planned rest. The next predictor was perfectionist expectations, right? Both internally, like from within, like your own thoughts, and externally, you can be influenced by, coaches, parents, in the dog agility world, most likely from your classmates, right? Especially if you're in like a high level training group, some training schools or a lot of training schools, like all the master's dogs they train on Monday night and it's your big dream to make it to the Monday 7 p.m. class because that's where all the best handlers are. And, maybe the beginners are on Thursday or something like that. Then your third predictor is strong identity fusion with the sport, which I think that's pretty interesting because if you're a dog agility trainer, right, and you take 3 months off from doing dog agility, I mean, what are you doing those 3 months? Mm-hmm. Right? So some people may think, well, I'm nothing. Like I don't know. There are issues around identity there. I think that's interesting because dog agility. Okay, so let me put it this way. If I'm a doctor, and I am a doctor, I'll always be a doctor, right? I've earned that degree. People will call me a doctor. Even if I retire, I'm a doctor, And I think of myself as a doctor. Other people are going to think of me as a doctor. Let's say you're dog agility and now you've been not doing dog agility for 2 years. Are you still a dog agility trainer if you haven't been to a competition in 2 years?
Right.
If you're not training a dog right now, are you a dog agility trainer? Or do you start to speak of it in the past tense?
Right.
Because once you start speaking of it in the past tense, let's say you got a dog and now you haven't been in a trial for a year, your dog has health issues or whatever, or you have issues, right? You knee replacement or whatever. Then you start to think, well, I can't call myself that anymore. Right. So maybe there are issues around identity, right? Mm-hmm. Within the sport. Okay. So what then is the solution?
Right.
Okay. So again, I'm going to start with the studies. Right. And what they showed. And so 3 things. Number 1, athletes need autonomy in training.
So some choice.
Yeah. So you may train at a very good school or have a very good instructor or personal coach. But if they are calling all the shots and you are kind of at their mercy in terms of scheduling and things like that, and you don't have a lot of say, you can be a little more susceptible to burnout, right? So I think you need a little bit more control, right? And so I assume that's kind of what they're going for here.
Yep. I think also the control in the form of your trial schedule. So I would say the way that people lose control is they fall into a habit of thinking they have to enter everything. Even though nobody is really making you do that, if you default to, I'm always going to enter, you effectively have lost your say in the schedule, right? And so I think kind of taking a more critical eye to what you enter and what events you choose for yourself. And I think that is actually helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Okay, and you can also reduce burnout when training or with training that is varied and playful. So I think athletic coaches kind of know this, good ones do, and they kind of build that fun into games, right? Dog agility, I think I've seen that, right? Where you have like a fun day. Usually it's around like holidays, like, oh, for Halloween, we're going to run this course, or we're going to do a course that's shaped like a Christmas tree and there's going to be prizes and different things like that. But where's the zero stress, just get out there and, I don't know, run some jump shoots with your dog kind of thing, even though they're master's level dogs, right?
I think it's less about, I think that this is less about what trainers set up, and it's more about how we approach the sport when we're on our second and our third dog. Because I think we, as handlers, we start to think of everything as, what is the point of this lesson? And I want the fastest path from my dog doesn't know agility till I am out in the ring. And I don't want any extraneous stuff.
Right.
But in doing that, you can actually set up your own burnout, right? Because every single session you're out there going, what do I need to get into the ring?
So you mean like if with your first dog, you kind of got your Masters Agility Championship dog, your mock, and you really kind of felt like you guys were clicking as a team and they were 6, you're like, well, obviously for my next dog, I'm going to get there before 6, maybe like 4. And then, a couple dogs later, you're like, as soon as there are 2 or 3, I want to be out there and then just
at the big events, right?
Zipping through it very early in the career. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that can put a lot on you. Okay. And then the third thing to reduce burnout would be to have seasonal breaks or intentional off cycles. And so we've talked about that. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me.
Right. And I think one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this is because, so first off, I want to preface this by saying, I think that I don't want anybody to feel like if they are done with agility, that they are a bad person in any way. That is not what I am saying here, right? You can leave the sport and you will not hurt our feelings. Like sometimes you have phases of life and you do different things in different phases, and that's fine. But I also don't want people to think the first time they experience burnout, this means the sport isn't for me anymore. I've lost the joy and it's never coming back. Because I also don't think that that is true for the majority of handlers. And the illustration that I would use is, and hopefully we all can think back to having a little bit of this feeling when we were kids. And the feeling is this. How excited were you for spring break? I mean, for summer break, right? You've been going to school all year long. How excited were you for summer break? So excited, so ready to be done with school, right? Mm-hmm. But then when the fall comes around, how excited were you to go back? A lot of us were, yes, you were like, I kind of don't want to go to school, but also you were excited.
No,
you were excited to go back. Yeah. Couldn't wait to see your friends again, to see people that you hadn't seen all summer, and you were excited, Yep. And you did that every year for the entire, 12 years from kindergarten till you graduated high school, right?
13 years, but yes.
13 years. Okay. So I use that to illustrate the fact that just because you are feeling a little bit of burnout now does not mean that the sport has lost its magic for you. It could just mean that a break is in order and that you will come back to it in your own time, maybe with, a different dog or something like that. And that is totally fine too.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, I think we have now kind of a solid plan, right? To counter this, you want to make sure that you're taking breaks. 2 to 6 weeks is what might generically be recommended. I think the more you do and the more intensely you do it, the longer the break should be.
Yep.
I personally believe it should be at least 4 weeks, at least. Mm-hmm. For myself, I would take off as much time as I could. That would be 2 months. Sometimes it would stretch to 3 months if I could get away with it. I think working in some play days where you really have no goals, like you're not there to tighten up turns or, make your throttle better or increase the verbal response to whatever thing that you're working on, right? Just going out there and enjoying your dog on the field. That would be great. I think shifting your focus to other things that are dog related. Here, I think people have done a really good job, right? So people, especially if their dog maybe doesn't enjoy agility quite as much, or they themselves don't enjoy it, even if their dog does, they're doing other things. The big one I think of is scent work.
Yeah, that had an explosion.
Yeah, an explosion. And I feel like that is kind of related to this. But doing trick training, just taking your dogs hiking, putting them in an obedience class. Rally was another one that a lot of people really got into, a lot of agility people specifically. And I think all of that is great. All the cross training stuff, I think it really helps with burnout on the agility side. Okay. And I think just making sure that your training makes sense in terms of like, hey, you're not doing weave pulls like every day for 3 weeks straight. You know, you get back injuries and stuff like that. So you should probably have someone like taking a look at your stuff or running it by your instructor, making sure that you have periodization kind of built into your training, that kind of stuff. And then I think the last thing to consider is just the culture in dog agility. And I feel like there is growing recognition that your dog needs a break, and everybody says your dog needs a break. Having said that, the organizations, and I'm not saying any one organization, it's all of them
in aggregate,
taken all together. There is a darn show every single weekend, right? You could show every weekend all year round, right? And you as the handler, as the instructor, as the human part of the team, have to be able to say no.
Right. All right. So I hope that gives some people, maybe just a different perspective on their own experience and some thoughts on how to get through it. And also just not feeling bad about having these periods of time where you feel like you need a break. There is nothing wrong with taking a break, and there's nothing wrong with you for feeling like you need that. So take care of yourself, take care of your dog, and then come back to the sport when you're ready. And that's it for this week's podcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors, St. Rocco's Treats and Clip and Go Agility. Happy training.
Thank you for listening to Bad Dog Agility. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. For more information, updates, and links to all our socials, just check out our website, www.baddogagility.com. If you haven't already signed up for our email subscription, we would love to have you join the BDA community. Until next time, take care.